Hello, Virgo, Sun, Moon, and Rising sign. This is your 2025 forecast, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining me here and for your support. As you might know, I don't monetize my channel, so this is my way of asking for your contribution for my work. And I really hope that I can satisfy you that you are going to get something out of this hour and a half. Usually, it's each video is about an hour and a half, and this is an overview of what is for me, the most important thing for you to know about next year. I'm doing this about 2 months before the beginning of the year. So there are things that I'm going to refer back to in terms of 2024 because there's a lot that's been developing from 2024 that you're going to be picking up in 2025. And I hope you'll feel that you're moving forward after a year of perhaps feeling that things have not been really moving in your direction. Now, I am going to look at all of the major outer planet transits. I'm going to look at their ingresses as all of the bigger planets are moving, all of the planets are changing sign. I'm not going to be putting a lot of attention on your ruler, Mercury, not because it's not important, but because it's just too much information to fit into this video. And so there, here and there, we'll talk about Mercury, especially as it reflects in the various bigger transits, but also the eclipses that we're going to talk a lot about. And you are going to be very personally affected by these eclipses. So we're going to spend a lot of time on the nodal shift and the eclipses for Virgo. Before we begin with that, let's have a look at the chart of the very beginning of the year. And we're going to start with January 3rd rather than the 1st, simply because that's the day when there's some really interesting shifts going on that are going to change the flavor of the spring. So we have already at the very top of the day, we've got an opposition between Mars and Pluto. It's actually in the first degree. So we see that Mars is approaching the first degree, or it's moving away from the first degree. So it was earlier in the day on the 3rd of January. I just wanted to move the dial so that I would have Virgo on the ascendant. So if this is your ascendant, this will be really specific to your life. You'll be able to relate more directly to that. If it's your sun that's in Virgo, I think you'll still be able to relate quite strongly to this, and especially as reflects your career, or your drive and ambition, your sense of what you're here for. This might also represent men in your life, including your father, for example. And if this is your moon, this is going to be a little bit more internal. You might find that more either the mind or the heart or the emotional nature of your life is affected more. And this is by what we call derived houses. And so instead of having the ascendant as the first house, we would put the sun on the first house, make it a solar chart, or the moon on the first house, make it a lunar chart. And that's why these interpretations work for the sun, moon, and ascendant. So right off the bat, we find here with that opposition of retrograde Mars in opposition to Pluto in your sixth house that's just entered in to your sixth house, we see that there's a qualitative difference in terms of your everyday life. There may be an issue of a struggle around things that might feel like people who have not been supportive, or that you're recognizing that you yourself have not been working in your own favor, doing things that are perhaps unconscious. For you, Mars rules your eighth house of the unconscious mind, and it rules your third house of the conscious mind. And so there is something here that might connect you to habits or worries or anxieties that have been undermining your overall well-being. That can also be something to do with your spiritual desires or your spiritual life, or just overall the quality of your mind. Am I feeling happy or not? Am I needing to take a break? Am I needing to check in with my health? Certainly with the North Node in the eighth house since July 2023, you would have spent a lot of time reflecting on your intimate life and perhaps also your psychological nature, issues to do with your feelings and your inner experience of life. Perhaps also feeling that there have been a lot of challenges over the last year and a half. And 2024 and from March 2023 have had Saturn in the house opposite you, in your house of relationships in Pisces. which is your seventh house. And Saturn opposite oneself is really not easy. It's difficult to integrate because it feels like there's always something that is not quite letting you flow, not really letting you move ahead. It makes you work extra hard, or it makes relationships feel challenged. There's a challenge perhaps with a distance, or there's a challenge in terms of your worldview, and that things have not necessarily been panning out or operating in a smooth way. This might be around business relationships, like business partners or clients, for example. And we see that especially also because Jupiter, which has been in your 10th house since last May 2024, has been squaring Saturn. The last time it squared Saturn was 25 December 2024. It's still in an orb of a square with Saturn even as we start the year. So there is something that might be feeling like just like this kind of restriction and holding you back from something. Now, when Saturn moves direct, which it did already on the 15th of November of 2024, so having been retrograde for most of this summer, or at least the middle of 2024 and into that 15 November timeframe, there is this feeling now of something's changing. There's a forward momentum, forward release, but the difference is that now the square is coming from the career, and this might be around opportunities that are either not really suiting you, or they're not really the vision that you hold, or the opportunity has passed. It's no longer available to you, and you need to reflect. You need to reconsider. Now, this doesn't last terribly long because Jupiter will be stationing direct on the 4th of February. So you don't need to worry much longer, one more month, let's say, in the year before things start to really move in a more accelerated way in a new direction. And this is especially true because with that Pluto in the sixth house, your everyday life is changing over the next 20 years. Now, this already began when Pluto entered your sixth house the very first time, which was on the 23rd of March 2023. And it has gone back and forth between the fifth house and the sixth house. So when Pluto was in your fifth, there may have been quite a lot of passion around either a relationship or the idea of relationships that had actually been maybe a distraction in your life, or passion around some aspect of your self-expression, a desire to be seen, a desire to be who you need to be. And you've kind of got a handle on that now. And where Pluto is, or perhaps there's something around children, for those of you who have children or who wanted children, that a lot of your time over the last 16 years with Pluto in Capricorn in your fifth house has been a lot about children and what to do about children, and having to perhaps deal with actual practical day-to-day things around children. And certainly you would have got in touch with your sense of your creative center and also your capacity to be self-expressed. And hopefully that's something that you've become faithful to. You've become attuned to, who am I really? How do I show up in the world? How do I really want to be in the world? Because now Pluto pulls you into everyday life with that attitude. So it's not that you missed the boat and, sorry, you can't figure that out anymore. It's about recognizing where perhaps you still haven't really allowed yourself to be entirely yourself. And while Pluto is moving into the sixth house, you do have this opportunity. The Mars opposite Pluto for me in your 12th house represents this inner frustration, or a feeling of perhaps having let yourself down, or feeling like something around you has been an opposition or a frustration, but that you're recognizing that. And now when Mars and Pluto oppose each other one last time at this same area of the chart, except at 3 degrees of Leo, Mars will be direct, and 3 degrees of Aquarius, where Pluto will be retrograde, then there's going to be an understanding of this dynamic that you have actually been building since the beginning of this year. So it's a lot that right off the bat is saying there's something that has to be completely different in your life from this point forward. Certainly, you would have heard by now, or you would have certainly intuited by now, that this is not only your story, but the story of the world around us. And so this is that you're participating in a change that is going on in the world around us. And you are personally invited this year to participate in a way that says, I need to change who I am. I need to change the dynamic I have in relationship to others. in a generalized sense, and in relationship to relationship, and in relationship to a particular person or people, but also in relationship to myself. And this is your mission from the 11th of January, 11th, 12th of January, when the nodal axis shifts into your sign and Pisces, the opposite sign. So we're going to look at that in a moment. Before we do, I want to emphasize that at the same time that Mars is opposing Pluto on this 3rd of January, and by the way, if you look up at if you're watching the video, and look up at the left-hand side of the screen, you will always see the date. You will see the time, the date, and in some cases, depending on what I'm showing you, you'll see the name of the transit, for example, planetary ingress or eclipse or something like that. So if you're not familiar with the glyphs and the astrological wheel, then look up in the corner where you find all of the data. I always use universal time. That means that some of the times and dates won't align with your particular location. So I'm not going to spend the time to delineate that for everyone. So just know that I work with universal time, which is roughly London time, and you can add or subtract accordingly. Um, and here we have Venus at the same time as that Mars-Pluto opposition is strong and exact earlier in the day on the 3rd of January, universal time. We have Venus going into the 7th house. And remember, the only reason that this clock face doesn't actually accommodate that is because I wanted to put you on the 1st house so that we could see really clearly what's going on. So we have Venus entering your 7th house right off the bat, 3rd day of the year, at the same time as there's this feeling of my life needs to change, something needs to come through here. There's a feeling of something is moving now with Saturn going direct, Saturn in the house of relationship, and Jupiter at the top of your chart really, really slowing down, still retrograde, but with Saturn moving away now from the square. It's the second Jupiter-Saturn square is done. It's completed by this time. That was a week before, or more than a week, 10 days before. And that's moving on now. The story is not entirely over, but you're feeling like whatever that lesson was, you learned it around the holiday time, the end of your holiday 24, 25 December, which for many people is a holiday time. Now, there's a lot going on in the month of January alone, so we're going to be here for a moment. Aside from Venus moving in, we also have the moon moving into the 7th house at the same time. And both of those will be reaching Saturn soon enough as well in the course of the days and weeks to come. And so there's something here that's quite inviting in terms of relationships for Virgos. And it's because there's a lot of activity, meaning that as a symbol of what's coming, there's a lot of your future this year and into 2026 that is going to entail what is going on in relationships. Now, the beautiful thing is you've got Saturn direct, which means now we're stabilizing, we're making something real. We've weeded out the bits that we don't, the either the types of relationships or the people or the quality of engagement that we know is not functioning any longer. And we're more clear about that. And the rest of 2025 and into 2026 is really about stabilizing that because Saturn is now going direct until November of 2020. Hang on now. Saturn is going, no, ignore that. Saturn is going direct until it leaves Pisces on the 25th of May. So you've got a long journey of 4 or 5 months to work on this stabilization, and then I'll explain later in the year how that changes for you. With the moon and Venus together, it's extremely harmonious, and especially so because Venus is exalted in Pisces, and the moon itself is it's not entirely it's not neither good nor bad in Pisces. There's no good or bad in any way, but it's just it can be very emotional. And so you might be in this place of deep commitment or deep emotionality around how you're feeling about whatever is going on in your relationship house. And this is something that may need to be addressed in terms of yourself and how you show up in relationship. Now, Virgo, we've spoken about this a few times if you've been following me for a while, that you know that you have a tendency to pick up strays and to tend to others, to want to help other people, save them from themselves, save them from God knows what. And this can be your downfall, Virgo. And here we find that Mars in opposition to Pluto, which can be telling you something about that, where Mars is ruling the North Node in the eighth house of intimacy, and what you share with other people. It's a trine, very, very supportive. But Mars is retrograde at this point, and it's only just checking in. How am I doing on in the angle of my self undoing? Remember that Mars rules your house of the mind and your actions and the things that you do every day, your willpower, your aims, and your way of communicating. And it also rules this eighth house where we find the North Node. So there's something here that you might have learned already, or that perhaps it's time to learn right now. And it certainly will be a year and a half, if not more, of you becoming aware of how you yourself are contributing to whatever it is that doesn't feel comfortable in relationships. So bear that in mind as I go through the year, because that's a theme that is just simply going to be recurring again and again and again. Your house of relationships is the major focus of the year. And especially, well, yourself and your house of relationships, that dynamic, the opposition, the polarity between Virgo and Pisces is a really major theme throughout the year. So this is a year for you to recognize that there's some things that I do, some ways that I show up that are not really good for me. They might be very good for other people, but overall, I might find myself stressed, anxious, sort of disappearing into the issues and dilemmas and feelings of other people. So let's put that aside and just hold on to that thought, reflect on that for yourself. Now, notice that also we have this remarkable quadrangle here. This is a rectangle that is known in terms of the astrological shapes or the aspect shapes as a mystic rectangle. So we have two trines, two sextiles, and an opposition. In fact, in this case, there's actually almost two oppositions between the nodes and then also with Neptune. And then, of course, there's this opposition that I already mentioned, which is Mars to Pluto. So that mystic rectangle is saying that those four planets are kind of the place to put your attention in terms of the solution. So as I've just pointed out here, there's something that you've already understood for the year and a half or even more, because if we look at this dynamic between Libra and Aries, it's actually been since April. I think it was even the 20th of April of 2023 that we've been operating here, because the first eclipse in Aries was April 2023. And then the nodes moved in to the Aries Libra axis in July 2023. That's been the theme. Who am I in relationship? How do I engage in relationship? And in my value, what is my value? How have I evaluated myself or this stuff around me? How have I been involved with my family or extracting myself from my family? And also, how has that been reflecting in terms of my intimacy, my emotional, psychological, and sexual intimacy? How has that all become a point of focus for me over the last year and a half or two? Um, so that's the one opposition. And then we have this Mars Pluto opposition, which I spoke about, which again can also have this quality of self-undoing or issues around health and healing that can be mental health, spiritual health, or physical health. Something around what you're recognizing in your everyday experience needs to change. Pluto is coming into your sixth house of illness and challenges and work and what you do every day, how you structure your day, your health regime, your health habits or your daily habits, your work habits. Are you a workaholic? Are you doing too much? Are you an alcoholic? Are you dealing with addiction? Well, that's what this dynamic is showing you. So the 12th house is, as I said, it's the self-undoing, the place of our being our own worst enemy, or is the place of hidden enemies. Now, again, those hidden enemies are usually coming from within, from ourselves. The call is coming from within the house, and But of course, there can be individuals in our life that have not been supportive. And that's where Saturn comes in handy in your house of relationship, trying to figure out, pardon me, Saturn there, coming in to help you sort out who needs to be there and who shouldn't be there any longer in your life. Um, and by the way, it's not always about the other one. Just remember that it's not always about the other one. It's about how have we invited that into our lives. So that mystic rectangle, notice, is the key to your healing. It's the key to you understanding yourself. And it's just on the precipice of this transformation where the nodal axis will shift for the first time since 2006 into your first house and seventh house. All right. So the last time we had this was the sort of middle of 2006 until the end of 2007. And that was a time where, of course, so much changed. That was just prior to Pluto moving into your fifth house of romantic love and so on. So there was this dynamic between self and other that may have actually had something to do with your psychological foundation or the home and family, your lineage, and so on. And now we're looking at something quite different because the energy has been understood in terms of who am I in relation to all of that in a very profound way. Pluto going through the fifth house really gets you to clarify what is it that I want and who am I? How do I express myself out in the world? How can I enjoy my life and have this sense of self, sense of showing up as myself? With Capricorn and therefore Saturn ruling your fifth house, sometimes Virgos find it difficult to just simply enjoy. There may be always this kind of feeling of obligation and duty and what do I have to do? How do I have to show up? Kind of a nagging feeling of guilt or doubt around just being able to kind of sit down and relax. And so there can be this flipping and flopping between doing nothing, letting go, abandoning, because what's the point? It's impossible to achieve what I want to achieve or what everybody expects of me. Or I just work myself to death and I have no fun at all. So hopefully Pluto brought you a lot of understanding over the last 16 years of the nuance between those two extremes. And now when Pluto goes through the sixth house, it's going to show you how that reflects in your everyday life and your health and so on. So this is the mystic rectangle to keep in mind as we're literally still talking about the beginning of January here, right? We're only just into the year. So this is how we want to frame the look forward into the year. And then we go forward in the next few days, if we just shift things forward to January there we go. The 12th we've got so overnight. So we on January 12th, universal time, we've got the south node moving into. Let me just shift this again in terms of the times because we just want you. There we go. So we've got the south node moving into your house of self from the 11th to the 12th of January, and the north node, of course, then in your house of the other, of the relationship. The North Node and Mars continue to have this trine, and that I find very interesting. There is still an ongoing opposition between Mars and Pluto. It's still in orb. It's just now it's what's called an out of sign orb, whereas Mars has gone from the Leo, first degree of Leo, to the first degree of Aries in trine. Now it's gone to the later degrees of Cancer and the later degrees of Pisces. So we're back in water here, very emotional energy. Now that story with Mars began in on September, the 4th September 2024. And it lasted until about the 4th of November 2024. So 2 months almost day for day that Mars was there in your 11th house of your sense of the future. Now, your 11th house also has the feeling of family. For you, friends are like family. For you, people come into your life in a way that either nurtures you or you can nurture them. Now, that's part of this dilemma of picking up strays that we already mentioned. I'm not going to nag you about that, but just to say, this is also part of that story. Now, Mars is going through your 11th house, as I mentioned. Since September, it went into your 12th house, just into the first 6 degrees of the 12th house, but it then needs to come back for review And so it will be back in your 11th house from the 6th of January until the 18th of April. And it's actually going to back up to the 17th degree. Now, let me just double check the dates here for you to see where Mars is stationing. Yes, the 24th of February. Mars will station direct in your 11th house at the 17 degrees of Cancer. So you might have something around the, let's say, 14, 15 to 19, 20 degrees of Cancer or Virgo or any of the cardinal or mutable signs that Virgo is mutable sign. So that means um, Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces, or the cardinal signs, which are Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. So those are the strongest affected by this station. And in those dynamics, you're going to find that there's something that changes in relationship to your dreams for the future, the people you spend time with, the quality of friendships, and maybe you start to realize I can't be like this anymore. These people are no longer my tribe, or I can't keep expecting that in my future. Now I have a different vision. I have a different goal for my long-term future. The 11th house is also the house of gains. And so there may be something that you realize that you have to change, thinking of course, again about that Pluto going into your sixth house all this time now, 20 years from now, changing your everyday life in terms of work, as well as Jupiter at the top of your chart in the 10th house of your perhaps work or career or vocation, or your sense of what do you contribute out in society, what do you contribute in the world, how do you show up in society? And Mars in the 11th house is saying, yeah, I've got a different goal now, I've got a different plan for all of this. How I earn money, how I show up, the groups that I show up in, the friends that are there. Either you take on a certain mantle of responsibility or you decide, I'm done with this, I'm moving on. And this is part of the journey of Mars that continues through your 11th house until the 18th of April. So we'll leave it at that. And then later in the spring, we'll look at Mars going back through the 12th. So let's come back. So this is part of background. Remember that Mars opposite Pluto is still part of that background story, insofar as Mars continues to sextile the South Node and trine the North Node. Now the North Node is firmly in your house of relationships. How do you deal with people? Who do you want in your life? There's going to be a lot of attention on that. If you work for yourself, you at this time, through January, you've got Mercury, your ruler, in either your fourth house. It starts out the year in your fourth house or in your fifth house of entrepreneurship. So at this time, as the nodes are changing, your ruler, Mercury, which is ruling the South Node, is in your fifth house of creativity and self-expression and entrepreneurship and how you connect with people. It's building to an opposition with a very strong moon in Cancer, moon in being in her own sign, and that maybe suggests to me there's something I need to see your chart, but there's something that you're ready to launch or decide around your work, around something that you might want to be doing for reasons of visibility or the public or connecting with social groups or online or some kind of dynamic that might also have perhaps something to do with like a YouTube channel or a blog or something like that that you would like to develop. Um, but at the very least, Mercury in the fifth house is also extremely helpful for working with children or your own children or dealing with learning, education. The fifth house is the house of students and the house of wisdom that comes through other life experiences. And and with Mercury in the fifth, you've got a lot of creative expression. It's like you being in the fifth house. There's a lot of creative expression, creative drive, and the sun is also there at the same time, and it's in a trine to Uranus in your ninth house of vision, being in having this vision, holding a vision for yourself, and that Uranus has been there in the ninth house, giving you this renewed vision and a sense of maybe an expanded horizon or expanded notion of what is my life all about, and what part of the world is my oyster, let's say, and 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 having that trine to the sun gives me this other idea that there is really something that you're putting a lot of focus on in terms of generating something that's creative, generating something that brings good fortune. Because we do have this opportunity right off the bat. Mercury is also sextiling Venus, and Venus herself is trining the moon. And so there's something very harmonious about this moment when the nodes shift into your sign. And so this is also, it's not quite happening here, but eventually there's going to be a few interactions where Uranus and the South Node, Uranus and the North Node move in favorable flow. So there's going to be, it's almost there. It's sort of a little bit further away than I would get excited about, a 6, 7 degrees difference, but it's relevant to just keep that in mind that Uranus is going to be giving you opportunities that are striking and allowing you to see things in a new light in the early months of 2025. Perhaps with reference to who do I work with in terms of business partners or clients or my life partner or just my really important people who's sitting across the table from me. So this is a really lovely ingress in terms of the nodes. And I want you to bear in mind also that this is the flavor of all of 2025 and for the nodal axis into 2026. So I think you're onto something here that didn't feel quite ready or possible even in 2024. And 2025 just comes in and says, you know what, it really is possible. Now, Jupiter, which is in your 10th house, is ruling your 7th house, ruling the North Node, still ruling Neptune, which has been lurking in your 7th house since 2011. Not very helpful when it comes to taking care of others, because you may have also found yourself disappointed by other people or duped by other people, or really not projecting things onto people and not really seeing them clearly, and only later realizing that you'd been wasting a lot of your time and energy on the wrong people. Now, Neptune is nearly moving out of your 7th house. By the end of March, Neptune will be gone from there. But that Jupiter from your 10th house continues to rule those planets. So Saturn, Neptune, Venus, and the North Node are all under Jupiter's watchful eye. And your house of home is also ruled by Jupiter. So there is something really helpful coming in here that's beneficial, but it's not, again, it's kind of like yes, but not quite. It's not quite right because Jupiter itself is not in the best condition in terms of being in Gemini. It's very, very happy being in your 10th house, but it's only going to be when Jupiter moves into your 11th house on the 9th of June that things really start to take off for you and things really start to work out. So I'd like you to think of this early part of the year of 2025 as an opportunity to really get clear, strategize, understand, be sincere with yourself. What do I need to operate and function well in my mind, spirit, and body every day? Who do I need by my side? Who do I want to distance myself from? And all of those questions um, need to come through a kind of a filter over the first few months of the year in order to really jump on the opportunities that are coming through March, April, and May, and into July even of 2025. So, what else do I need to say about this? So, yeah, this you see, this is a game-changing year for Virgo. It's a very significant time, and you're going to be very much a kind of part of the zeitgeist where there's a lot of the energy, our collective energy, is going to be calling in the energy of Virgo in so many ways. There's something that we need to shed. Part of what we need to shed on a sort of metaphysical or psychological level is this kind of a potential for being hypercritical or a potential for being dissatisfied and let that go and recognize where things are possible, where things are functioning, where things are actually good enough, and where they're in fact actually quite bloody marvelous. And especially with that Piscean energy where the North Node is, try to expand your horizons, not just with people, but in terms of your concept of life and how you engage with life, because remember, it's not just about the relationships that you're in this dynamic, but it's about your relationship to yourself, which fundamentally guides how you operate and function in your everyday life. So there's something here that is really very important that you're picking up this year. Now, if you're old enough, you'll go back again to 2006, 2007 and see how that changed you. And then perhaps if you're old enough again, you can go right back to what would it be? 1989 and 1988, 89, and see how that shifted you as well. Um, right, let's keep going because there's a lot to cover here. What I'd like to introduce you to is a really wonderful thing that's going on at the end of January. See, we're not even out of the first month of the year, and we're still going here, Virgo. So here we have the a very interesting pile up in Pisces, and again, I'm going to have to now go back. I'm just going to have to go back an hour. Yeah, there we go. So we keep you on the first house. And here we have this very interesting pile up. Your ruler is now with Pluto and the Sun in your sixth house. That's not really what I'm pointing to, but it's interesting that it's actually conjoining those planets and then building to a trine with Jupiter, which is ruled by your ruler. So that's already significant. And again, remember that your planetary ruler Mercury rules and is exalted in Virgo, and it's also ruling Gemini. So while Jupiter is in Gemini, it's also, you can think of that as intimately connected to what your experience is in terms of that Jupiter in your 10th house. So it's very relevant to you, your career focus and what you're doing, your social status is uppermost on your mind in this early first half of the year. So that's not what I wanted to say, but what I did want to point out was this pileup that is especially important in the late degrees of Pisces. So notice that 29, 28, 27 degrees of Pisces is going to return again and again and again. And but of course, by extension, that means that 29, 28, 27 degrees of Virgo is going to return again and again and again throughout this year in many different ways. And equally, we're looking at the very first degrees, as we saw at the very beginning of the year, where the North Node was at the 0 degree point of Aries. And we're going to see that also becoming extremely important. Where the 0 degree point of Aries is the beginning of the zodiac. It's something that is extremely vital because it ties in what our personal experience is with the collective experience, that 0 degree Aries point. And that's where we're going to find Saturn and Neptune soon enough, and we'll get there, but not quite yet. So I just wanted to show this too, because something about let's call it the last week of January, the first week of February, but most especially the 1st of February, when the moon lines up with Neptune, Venus, and the North Node, there's something here I'd like you to take note of. So whatever this is, whatever is going on, write it down, try to make sense of it if you can in the moment. And if it doesn't make sense, just notice what's going on around this time, because there's going to be messages coming throughout the year that recall this moment. It may be a chance meeting. It may be something that comes through an offer. It may become something that comes through your awareness of a way that you are in relationship. It may be something about a job because your ruler is in the sixth house with the sun, with Pluto, and it's trining Jupiter in your 10th house. Jupiter, by the way, is moving very, very slowly at this point because on the 4th of February, remember this is the 1st of February, 4th of February, Jupiter will be stationing direct, and it's roughly at this degree point. It's not really moving from this degree point that it's stationed. So Jupiter trining the sun, or rather the sun trining Jupiter, is already a very beneficial kind of signal. But when Jupiter is actually stationing, we're going to have Mercury trining Jupiter. Again, ruled by your ruler. Mercury is your ruler. So think in terms of anything that you might have around 11 degrees, anything between let's say 9 degrees, and maybe 13, 14 degrees of your sign or any mutable sign. So think about these degree points as an extra bit of information, but nonetheless, this matters to all of you. So something big's happening here in your social status. Something big is happening here that might be, again, coming from a person that you meet or a person that you realize is part of the situation that you want to change or you need to move towards or move away from, whatever the thing is. It's going to serve you. It's going to be something that you become aware of. There can be, with Neptune, worth mentioning, as I mentioned already, that can be part of this not seeing people clearly. So there can be issues around dis, disappointment or disillusionment or not seeing clearly, not, being deluded, literally, perhaps with somebody or somebody who has dependency issues or somebody who has for whatever reason is not functioning directly in their lifetime, in their life, and you're trying to sort them out. With Mars here, still retrograde in your 11th house, there can be some, you're still working on this vision. Is this working for me? Is that something I need to keep participating in? That Mars perhaps can represent an older sibling and something that you need to contend with, or a cousin, uncle, important person in your extended family, because Mars is representing your third house in your chart, as well as the eighth house of issues that might involve crises of some kind. This might be part of the story, in which case, of course, you're going to help these people. But there might just be something that is also softening your sense around somebody, that you're having more compassion, that you're having more awareness, that there's more of a sense of what is the spiritual truth, let's say, of this connection, the spiritual truth of this value and this way of relating to this individual. So this is also a potentially very harmonious time in relationship. And now we also have Uranus moving direct in your ninth house. That means that it's going to spend the rest of its time from the end of January all the way through till the 7th of July. Is going to move through the rest of the last 7 degrees of your ninth house, and then in July move into your 10th. So we're moving again based on information that you already gleaned from the middle of 2024. Uranus is now having you move forward based on this. So this is also part of the story here. Right now, we're going to carry on here. I'd like to move forward into the eclipses. Now we have the very first one, which is about you. And wouldn't you know it, we've got to turn the whole way around. So I'm going to just carry on, go forward so that you can be at the top of the first house. So this is not the degree of the eclipse. I just moved that forward. So the eclipse itself, let me come back to that. The eclipse itself is happening at almost 7 a.m. Universal Time on the 14th of March. And I'm just moving the dial forward so that you can be on the first house so we can see clearly how that's affecting you. Okay, so the actual degree of the eclipse is 23 degrees of Pisces, where the sun is, and the moon would be at 23 degrees of Virgo, not at 28 like you see here. Nonetheless, remember I said that 29, 28, 27 degree zone is very, very important. And here we have, again, the South Node still lingering there. The moon was on the upper side of that. So if you have anything between, let's say, 20 degrees of Virgo and 29, or the very end of Virgo, this eclipse is extremely significant for you. And I would have to see your chart to see other regions of significance, but let's just say this is a very, very significant time. By the way, Venus in the meantime has stationed retrograde in Aries. So she left just before we get into the juice of this eclipse. Venus left your seventh house, where, by the way, she's going to be for ages in the beginning of the year, which is why it's quite exciting for your relationship energy. She left your seventh house on the 4th of February. So we had the change of Venus moving into your eighth house in Aries at the same time that Jupiter stationed. And when Jupiter stations and Venus moves into a new sign, there's something that's shifting energetically as well. So again, you're going to get that feeling throughout the month of February, just as I showed you earlier, that something really is changing now. Venus in Aries is much more impulsive. She's technically in her what's called the detriment of Venus because she rules your opposite sign of Libra. And she gets up to this point of 10 degrees and 50 minutes, 50 minutes of Aries, and then she retrogrades at that point, and that station retrograde is on the 2nd of March. So she's really moving slow all the way through February and all the way through March. She's kind of really lingering around these early degrees of Aries, so the whole of the time. And if you have anything in the early degrees of cardinal signs, then that will be significant for you too. Now, there's a lot in your house of what is hidden from you, or the unconscious processes, or intimacy, or what you share with another person. Now, again, this can have something to do with this need to change something in relationship. And notice that at the time that Venus is retrograding, and at the time that she has stationed retrograde, Mercury was with her. Mercury moving now slowly, slowly, because also Mercury is about to station retrograde, and that will happen on the 16th. So 2 days after this eclipse, we have the ruler of the moon, the ruler of this eclipse, stationing retrograde. So it's going very slowly. And Mercury will station retrograde until it stations direct on the 8th of April in Pisces. So both Mercury and Venus station retrograde in Aries, and then they retrograde back into Pisces, and then station direct before moving again. Now, that means that Venus is in your 7th house or 8th house, connecting you to relationships, connecting you to what you share with other people, connecting you to the emotional or psychological or even sexual intimacy or financial entanglement with other people from January, February, March, April, and only finally leaving at the end of April. So that's a big deal. That's a really big deal. In fact, she's only leaving Aries on the 6th of June. So she's leaving Pisces on the 30th of April, but she's only leaving your 8th house by the 6th of June. So the first 5 months of the year are really, again, heavily emphasizing what is going on in my relationship house, what is going on in the way that I interact with people, in the way that I share money, in the way that I share intimacy, in the way that I share my, bare my soul, or talk about what most concerns me. This is the first few months of the year for Virgo rising. Right, now we're back to the eclipse. Okay, so this is all in the context of the eclipse, but it's the weeks leading up to that. And again, I don't really have time to go through what your ruler is doing all year long, but this is an important retrograde. And in 2025, Mercury retrogrades only in fire signs. So it's part of the energy of the year, this fiery Mercury retrograde. So you're going to have that either in your 8th house, 12th house, or 4th house each time throughout the year. Now, back to the moon, which is in your 1st house. So there's something that you're recognizing about yourself in this mid-month point. Now, it's a total eclipse. So what that represents is that there's something that is before and something that is after this energy for you. This might involve moving. This might involve you deciding to move in with somebody, move out, away from somebody, move house in general, even with somebody. Or it might be something that you realize is, again, this way of being, the way of showing up for yourself or through yourself in relationships, in your bigger contribution to life, through your career, for example, through your outer activities in the world, all of which you're realizing something about yourself, and then it changes. Now, this can be, we've got Mars, by the way, stationing. Sorry, not stationing. Mars is now direct at this point. When did Mars turn direct? Hang on just a moment. Sorry. Yeah, I mentioned that 24th of February. So 3 weeks before this, Mars stationed direct at 17. Look at that, in 3 weeks, it's only gone 2 degrees. So Mars has been kind of lingering. Just hanging back. The Mars retrograde is a very long process. Remember, it's months and months. It's a long process. We've got another month of Mars in your 11th house. But this is part of the story, because whatever this thing was, this question that were asking about your future, about your goals, about your vision for the future, about your connections with groups and associations, and maybe spiritual groups or political groups, or the dynamics of just the everyday friendships. Whatever those questions were, Mars has now kind of figured out, and you're moving forward in a new way. There's something new. This can also be about how you earn money, or about relations with siblings, or about even family dynamics, how all of that needs to be adjusted and changed, and how you're reaching into something new based on what you've understood with this Mars. So it's really, again, very hard to overstate for Virgo how important this is for you this year in general. Right. Okay. That's it. And then, of course, we still have Saturn. Now, Saturn is with the sun at this time and opposing the moon. Remember, the moon was at 23 degrees, the sun was at 23 degrees of the opposition. Of course, the opposition makes a full moon, and that's why we had this lunar eclipse, because it was all about the moon itself not being visible. Now, Saturn was with the sun, and this is like the rebirth moment of Saturn. So, there again, it's like another message that says there's something new coming in your house of relationships. It's a new territory for Saturn. Saturn hasn't been here at this point. It's a new energy for you to feel like this is it. I get it now. I'm determined. I'm understanding this new thing. I know what to do. It might be difficult. I know how I need to go forward. I'm ready for it. And Saturn is also in a sextile. The Sun and Saturn are in sextile to Uranus, as the moon is in a trine to Uranus. So that's very favorable sort of energy for change. It's a dynamic change. We're ready for something. I'm so ready. It's like itching for change. So rather than a square, for example, or an opposition, which makes it feel like, oh my God, did that just happen? Or, how do I deal with this? It's a favorable thing. It's feeling like, yeah, I'm ready for this now. I'm up for that. We've got Jupiter also moving direct. So at this particular point, we only have Venus retrograding. And because Venus is the only one retrograding, the big question is around values, around relationship, energy in general. What do I share? How do I share it? What's in it for me? Don't forget yourself in the equation, Virgo. And also, is this still appropriate for me? Venus rules your second house of your values, of your income, of your family as well, and your self-esteem, and also your ninth house of your sense of purpose, your higher vision for you, for your life, and what gets you out of bed. And that's something to keep in mind in this. Whatever is being shared, whatever is transactional for you at this time, has to be based on these values, has to be based on something that you find important. Right, now we have another eclipse. So the next one that's coming up is an Aries eclipse. And now that is because of this journey of the almost 2 years that the eclipses, there's a bit of overlap, the beginning and the end of the eclipse cycles. We're here with the very last event within eclipses that still contains either the Aries or the Libra axis, or the Libra sign. So now we have the North Node in Pisces, but the actual eclipse, the new moon, is in 9 degrees of Aries. Now, this is happening almost 11 a.m. on the 29th of March, Universal Time. I'm now going to move the clock face so that we can find you again. So that's going to change the time, but this is just so that we can be clear. So this is a 9-degree new moon, meaning solar eclipse. Now, your ruler is retrograding at 0 degrees of your eighth house. So this is, remember, the 9-degree point was where Mercury retrograded, and Venus went to 10 degrees 50. So the two of them were in this vicinity of the 9-degree eclipse when they stationed and retrograded. So this eclipse is pulling that in again. That's the whole month of March, where that degree point is actually quite significant. So again, you can think about 9 degrees in any way. The previous October, the 2nd of October of 2024, the eclipse was so it was a new moon, 2nd of October, in Libra at 10 degrees. So this is like the opposite end of the stick. Now we're looking at something a little different. that has to do with the intimacy, that has to do with your shared resources, that has to do with family secrets, that has to do with some new way of starting out in terms of money that you get from clients or money that you get from business partnerships or through marriage, for example. There's something that is new here, a new cycle beginning. But because your ruler, Mercury, and Venus herself are retrograde, it's not quite clear. Whatever this is, it's kind of like new realization or a new thing that you're setting out on. But either it relates to older stuff that you're tying up and you're resolving from the past 2 years, which is very likely, or it's something that you think you should start, but it's not yet complete and you can't really jump into it yet. We have Saturn in a really strong sextile with Uranus. We have Mars sextiling Uranus, building to a sextile, and we have Mars and Saturn trining at the time of this eclipse. Really, really powerful. Now, Mars is moving faster. It's going to be leaving in 3 weeks' time. It's going to be leaving Cancer, but it's still not in very strong dignity. And it's this Mars that is ruling the eighth house for you. So there's something that's not quite right. It's not quite what you want yet. It's not quite clear. So whatever this is illustrating to you still might be a little bit of that feeling of yes, but. Right now, Jupiter is solidly moving direct. It has been at this point already for weeks, and that's also very helpful because now you've got Jupiter moving from this point on until the 9th of June, right across the rest of your 10th house. So whatever this new venture, new vision for your future, this sense of how you want to show up in the world, how people see you, your enthusiasm for a new relationship, a marriage, business partnership, or even just social recognition, whatever that is, it's moving now. It's moving forward. There's a feeling of yes. With that said, so this is the way life goes. It's not that everything is a yes all at once everywhere. It's usually a yes, and there's also this thing. So, often it can be like that, where things in our intimate life can be tricky while our public life is a raging success, or reverse, the public life is a mess and the intimate life is fantastic. Problems with kids, but the work is going well, or whatever the thing is. It's never entirely working out. But nonetheless, I think you're going to find that the spring, as you go through 2025, or we'll have to call it the early part of 2025 for those of you in the Southern Hemisphere, that those early months of 2025 are going to feel progressively better as you go forward, especially compared to 2024. And we're going to carry on because we still have some really interesting things. Now, this is the 29th of March. And then we have right after, the day after, we then have Neptune moving into Aries. So remember that your ruler, Mercury, has been conjoined with Neptune for many days already around the time of this eclipse. So the last, let's say, half of March and the early part of April. Neptune and Mercury are very, very close to each other. And then this starts to separate as Mercury retrogrades further. So we get a lot of action between Mercury and Venus at the same time. So again, there's this question am I seeing clearly, or am I being over optimistic, or am I being compassionate? Was I overly compassionate? These are the questions. Was this transaction honest or dishonest? These are the things that will be revealed to you. Now, Neptune now I just wanted to show you this. This is almost 1 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time, or Universal Time, on the 30th of March when Neptune goes in. I'm just going to move the dial so that we can get you on the first house. All right, so we now have again Virgo on the first house, and we have this movement of Neptune into the Aries point. Very significant. As I mentioned before, the Aries point is something that affects us all. So whatever is going on in your life around that 0-degree Aries, it also contains a seed of what is going on for all of us. We kind of interconnect that. We intersect at that point according to this worldview. This is coming from the Thema Mundi, where the so-called chart of the world is this way, with the with this Aries point being the kind of a conjunction point for all of us, humans and our societies. So as we get to this place where Neptune finally moves into your eighth house, we have Mercury and Venus together with the North Node. This is now the third time, or in fact, it's like just an ongoing party, basically, because we've had this already, remember, in January. So this energy of the late part of January, early part of February, all through February, most of March, and now right at the end of the month of March, has been this story of this connection between the North Node, Venus, Mercury, and Neptune. Now what we've got is Saturn getting closer and closer since the let's say the second week of March. So that's a part of this story that's growing. Saturn is still in this trine. It's being trined by Mars still. This is 2 weeks after the first eclipse. So that's this phase where Mars is still moving really slow, but it's starting to accelerate now towards the end of March as it's picking up steam to get into your 12th house. And then that energy of trine is about long, sort of a determination, the long view, seeing something that you can do. This is a can-do energy. I can do this thing. You've had that new moon in your eighth house. Now Neptune goes into your eighth house and starts to change your energy around what is all the eighth house stuff for you, which is about what's hidden behind the veil of your family secrecy, or around your unconscious processes, or around occult studies. If you're watching this, that's likely something to concern you. Um, sort of the mystery schools of life, and where you might start to feel even more attracted to all of those things, or you might start to become more intuitive. Now, intuitive doesn't necessarily mean woo-woo. It doesn't mean you're going to start gazing into a crystal ball with tarot cards. It means you become intuitive. If you're a stockbroker, that intuition helps you. If you're I don't know, a military person, your intuition helps you. And this will increase your intuition over the next 14 years. Neptune in the eighth house will absolutely increase your sensitivity to what is not obvious, the things that are not entirely obvious. But that also represents issues around intimacy, money, the things that you share with another person, your psychological nature, and so on. So again, depending on your natal chart, this can pose some dilemma because, and again, that'll be everybody will have their own version of this. That I can't predict globally. It's just not possible to say the same thing for everybody. But that energy of Neptune in the eighth house can be deceptive. It can lead, in some cases, to being cheated on, whether it be in your intimate relationship, or through money, or through a contract, or through, not seeing clearly what the engagement was, or being cheated out of an inheritance, or something like that. A lot of things matter. A lot of things are going to need to be taken into account before anything like that could be seen in your chart. It has to be individualized. But just to say that that's one potential for this Neptune going into your eighth house. Now, the important thing to know is that it's not going in there alone. It is actually going in there with Saturn, and that I'll show you in a moment. But just to say, to set this up as something that can be potentially confusing or not entirely clear for you. Now, we also have at this time a square between the moon and Mars, which is ruling the moon, and moon, which is ruling Mars, what's called a mutual reception. So that is a really interesting dynamic that pulls your eighth house into the 11th house. Now, from that perspective, with Neptune moving into the eighth, this for me would suggest that it's not a good time to borrow money from family or friends, or necessarily perhaps give money to a group or an association that you are participating in, or that there's something that might have you at odds emotionally or psychologically with a group of, who you belong to, whether it be political, spiritual, or whatever social group. Or there can be some issue around the dynamic of gains, because the 11th house is the house of gains, and the eighth house is also other people's money. So there's something here that's not entirely clear. Again, I can't really say what that will look like, but just to keep that in mind, if you are uh, either needing to donate or generate money for somebody else, or loan money or borrow money. This would be something of a bit of a gamble, meaning that you might end up, I don't know, paying more for the loan or never seeing the money again. Something like this can happen, not just because we have this Neptune there and then this square from the moon to Mars, but also because both Mercury, your ruler, and Venus, so Mercury is in double detriment because it's both in detriment and fall in Pisces, and it's retrograding with Venus on the North Node. So there's some big thing that might involve money between a couple, or money in terms of who you've loaned money to, or something along those lines. Just saying, just putting that out there. If you can't avoid it, do what you have to do. It might be something that's already underway and it's already sorting itself out cosmically. Let it happen. But if you have the option, let's say around this period of time, March and April, it would be better if you don't loan money or borrow, neither a borrower nor a lender be, as I think it was the Bible said. So that's that. So now we have this more extraordinary year is coming along. I can hear my dog getting hungry. She's growling at me. So now we have right, Saturn is now moving in along with Neptune into Aries. This is Saturn at 0 Aries on the 25th of May. It's going to happen around 4:36 a.m. Universal Time. And now I'm going to again move the dial so that we can have Virgo on the ascendant. Hello, Virgo. And there we are. So that again puts all the action there in your eighth house. Notice that the pressure is lifting a little bit. So as we go through the first 4 or 5 months of the year, all of this energy is on your seventh, eighth house. And then it starts to move to the top of the chart, bringing things out into the world, bringing things out into your vision, into your career, into your social circles. So what was being dealt with perhaps behind the scenes or internally is now becoming much more public. So here we have Saturn in the eighth house with Neptune. And this is a stabilizing factor, but it can also be that now there's something you need to account for. Saturn in the eighth house, especially when Saturn itself is not in good dignity. Saturn is considered to be in its fall in Aries because it actually is the um, exaltation ruler of Libra. It's exalted in Libra. So Saturn doesn't do very well in Aries. What that means is that there might be some trouble, again, some shenanigans around finances or around how you divide things up, or around perhaps inheritances or something that has to do with how you deal with sharing things, or perhaps you're going through a bit of a fallow patch in your relationships and there's no intimacy, or there's something going on here. Now, that may not be true instantly because we still have Venus there, very passionate Venus, and she's ruled by Mars, which is in the 12th house of bed pleasures in a very fiery Leo. So perhaps right off the bat, it's still okay. But I'm talking about the trend of the next 2.5 or 3 years that's potentially there. So this is also Venus trining Mars, Mars ruling that Venus, ruling Neptune, ruling Mars, ruling Saturn rather. And so whatever this is, it's extremely dynamic. But now remember, the eighth house is other people's money, and the 12th house is also the house of loss. And Mars rules your third house. It rules your third house of contractual agreements and agreements of all kinds, exchanges of all kinds, contracts that have to do with how you might transact. Do I want to sell my car? Do I want to sell, I don't know, widgets, whatever. So this is the energy there that you want to just be aware of. Now, since the 18th of April, you've had Mars now in your 12th house, and that's quite stimulating, particularly so if you work with people from afar. This also can be very constructive, having Saturn and Neptune in your eighth house, where it's really more about where you stabilize contracts or stabilize agreements, you become clear about things. There's a sextile there now, building to uh, Pluto, which hasn't been there before. We now have, well, the Neptune-Pluto sextile has been going on a century, so that's not news, but now the flavor is changing because Pluto is in Aquarius and Neptune is in Aries. But the sextile between Saturn and Pluto is more rare, and so not rare, but yeah, more rare, let's say it like that. So it's there's something new, let's say. There's a new dynamic here, and that's stabilizing. It's kind of a determination, again, that has to do with let's make a new foundation for something. Except that Neptune goes in at the same time and says, this, whatever this is, let's stop this. It's not working. This has to fall apart. This has to change. This marriage has to dissolve. This contract or this agreement has to dissolve. This way of being intimate has to stop. This way of, I don't know, perhaps following other people's evaluations of you and not feeling your own power, it has to stop. And then Saturn comes in and says, okay, there's a new way of doing this. We've got to reestablish new ground. Now, this is the dynamic between Saturn and Neptune for the better part of a year, because you're going to have this back and forth in your eighth house, back and forth into the seventh and eighth throughout 2025. And then finally, Saturn and Neptune go on the 20th of February 2026, they go together into your eighth house and stay there. So for the first few months of 2026, Saturn and Neptune are quite close again. So this is a long story. You don't have to get it right the first time. None of us will. It's more about, what are you paying attention to? Are you reading the tea leaves? Are you really, quite literally, eighth house? Are you able to figure out what this story is about for you? I have this very persistent fly who's after me as we're doing this. It's really annoying. Um, so at the same time that this is happening, we have a sextile to the sun and a trine from Pluto to the sun. So again, this is the event chart. This is the movement of Saturn into Aries, and that also is favorable. It helps. It's a supportive thing. It's an air trine that is supportive, as Pluto is sextiling, and then there's a sextile with the sun, and then a trine from the sun to Pluto. There's a lot of support here. So it's not all bad. It's just that you want to beware that there can be some things that are not so clear around those hidden areas of life. If you work with mystical things, if you work with um, I don't know, you work the way I'm doing now, for example, as a counselor, as somebody who is a therapist or a psychoanalyst or a psychotherapist or a whatever, art therapist, whatever the thing is, this is great for you, by the way. This is the best use of this kind of energy. So really supportive that allows you to bring that quality right into your work. Um, your ruler, Mercury, remember, is now in this sextile to the North Node, trining the South Node, and with Uranus. So Mercury and Uranus meet up together relatively rarely. And this particular meeting is very significant because it's happening again at the same time that we get all of these other influences of the planetary shifts. So the April May time period is going to be quite exciting, I think, for Virgo risings or Virgo sun moon, because there's something that is inviting you to show up differently in your life. Mercury and Uranus in your ninth house is visionary. It gives you a real sense of this is the thing, this is why I'm here, or that's what that means, or it's all meaningless. Whatever the thing is, you get it, and you understand it, and that's quite significant. The moon is there at the same time. The moon is exalted in your ninth house in Taurus. All of this is ruled, however, by this Venus, which is kind of a little edgy. She's a little jumpy. She's maybe a little impatient, and she's still thinking a lot about what she needs to do with other people. So again, this can be a mixed bag, simply because Venus herself is not in strong dignity as she's ruling this Mercury and Uranus conjunction. Now, what happens next is quite interesting. Now, we're going to go forward in time again, and we're going to pick up on Jupiter. Jupiter moves into your 11th house. Now, the Jupiter ingress into Cancer is the 9th of June at 10 p.m. Universal Time. Now, again, I'm going to have to move things forward just to make it easier to check where everything is happening in your chart. And here we now have Virgo back on the ascendant, and we have Jupiter in your 11th house. Now, Jupiter was ruled by Mercury, remember? And Mercury was with Jupiter just before, the weeks before, just after having left Uranus on the 25th of May. So Jupiter, or rather Mercury, cleared your 10th house really, really fast, joined Jupiter. And it's like an escort service, moves Jupiter out of its house and says, here, let's go and visit Cancer. Now Jupiter is exalted. Jupiter is delighted, not only because it's in the 11th house, where it loves to be, and brings a lot of benefit from other people, especially as the North Node is in Jupiter-ruled 7th house in Pisces. And we've got the 4th house of home and what makes you feel secure, also ruled by Jupiter, something really helpful. Here, there's even what's called a mutual generosity here between Jupiter and the moon, with the moon in Jupiter sign and Jupiter in the moon sign, even though there's no direct aspect. It's called a mutual generosity. And so we have this really wonderful energy here of Jupiter with your ruler, Mercury, in the 11th house of your vision for the future, social groups, getting help from other people, enlarging your audience or expanding the people who know that you're out there, having perhaps a new opportunity in terms of your gains, what you can earn. What's available to you in terms of what's even just pure dumb luck, because you've got Venus also in the 9th house of what is lucky. Now, the other aspect of this, Venus is sextiling, which is very lovely at the same time. But the other aspect of this is that while Jupiter is with Mercury, we have Saturn and Neptune creating a really strong square. So all four of them are in this dynamic of square. So whatever this tension is, this is recalling the Jupiter squaring Saturn that we had in August of 2024 and the 24th, 25th of December 2024. But this is different because now we're in a cardinal energy. So that was in the mutable sign. So Jupiter was in Gemini and Saturn was in Pisces. Now we have Saturn in Aries and we've got Jupiter exalted in Cancer. So now the square is like, yes, okay, I get it. But I kind of understood the message. Thanks, Saturn, for holding me back all this time. But now I'm ready to go, because then Saturn is going to retrograde back into your 7th house, where Jupiter is going to continue all the way up to, I think it's like 20, I don't know, really a lot, like 24 degrees or something of your 11th house. And Jupiter goes very quickly through Cancer before it retrogrades. And so Jupiter is in a happy place. It's exalted. It's going to bring you immense opportunities, great opportunities through friendships. Here we have that Mercury that is your ruler, and a new let's say, opportunity in general, to see your future. Remember what Mars was trying to calculate, what Mars was trying to change from September, October of 2024, and then again January through April of 2025. Mars was trying to calibrate and recalibrate your goals for the future and how you earn money and who's in your life and how do they participate in your environment, in your groups. How do you, allow in good fortune or joy, enjoyment? How do you see the future? Now Jupiter is there, and the future looks bright. The future looks a lot better. So I find this really interesting. It's a very nice dynamic for you. I think giving you a really great window on the year ahead. Now Jupiter will stay there until the end of July. Sorry, beginning of July 2026. So really nice way to kick off June there for you. And then this square to Neptune, square to Jupiter, there may be, again, this question, although all of this is like all systems go, there may be still this question around the 8th house stuff. Is there some issue around the family? Perhaps it's a loss. It could be a literal loss. Somebody passes away. That happens. This is life as a human being. Somebody maybe moves on out of your life. Some financial issue is also part of the dilemma, perhaps some issue around what may have been lost, or the sense of your health, again, maybe needing more attention. Remember that Mars in the 12th, especially in opposition to Pluto, um, which happened again in second half of April, happened the very beginning of the year on the 3rd of January, that was showing you something about your health, mental, physical, spiritual health. And now maybe you're back understanding something about that. With Mars ruling your eighth house of the unconscious, this would be a fantastic opportunity for you to overcome addictions, overcome these obstacles, whatever this dilemma was. And if it's about foreign lands, foreign people, foreign opportunities, it looks very, very constructive. Mars is in a square to Uranus. So there's a lot of dynamic action that might be involving the idea of moving abroad or an opportunity that comes from abroad, or just an awareness and a realization around what you think of as what this world is all about, what this life is all about. Remember that Uranus itself is 1 month away from shifting into your 10th house of career, and is going to change your vision of what you're doing out in the world. So let's have a look at that. Now we're looking at Uranus at 0 degrees of Gemini. That's on the 7th of July, 2025. It's 8:48 in the morning, Universal Time. I'm just going to shift the clock face forward so we can get you on the first. Now, that's just like we had with Jupiter being escorted in by Mercury, where Jupiter had been in Mercury's sign for a year. Now we have Venus, which had been hosting Uranus in her house. She comes in to the 10th house and escorts Uranus into the 10th. I find that really sweet. I don't know what that means. I just find that it's really interesting that we're pulling these notions forward. For me, the 9th to the 10th house means that what you understand about your purpose, what you understand about the bigger meaning of your life and the big questions of life, significance that has to do with knowledge and what you know of the meaning of life, or philosophies, what guides you, the morality that you bring into your life. You're pulling that into your house of career, into the way that you show up in society, into the way that people identify you and say, you're the person who does this, into your marital status, into your social status. By the way, that can also be part of this thing here with Virgo, especially as the North Node is in your house of the 7th house of marriage. The 8th house is what you gain from marriage. And so when Saturn moves into the 8th house, there can be a stabilizing of marriage. There can be something that feels like, okay, yeah, we're ready to do this thing. Now we have this new dynamic. It's still quite volatile. It's not entirely set because Uranus will go back into your 9th house. Uranus will do that in October. So Neptune will go back into Pisces on the 22nd of October, by the way, and it will stay in Pisces until the 26th of January of 2026. And then in terms of Saturn, that will go back into Pisces. Did I write that down even? Saturn will go back into Pisces in November, but I've forgotten the date. Sorry about that. But anyway, now let's come back to Uranus. So Uranus will come back into Taurus on the 18th of November. So from the 8th of July, let's say 7th of July Universal Time, until the 18th of November, 2025, you have Uranus in your 10th house. Then Uranus goes back into the 9th house to finalize that understanding of what am I here for? What is this whole thing? How do I show up? What do I really believe? How do I operate? What's my morality? What what do I believe about politics or religion or whatever, the guiding philosophy of life? Then Uranus will finally move back into your 10th house on the 25th of April, 2026, and it stays there for 7 years. I think it's like till 2032 before it moves into your 11th. But anyway, just as a really quick glimpse at what that could represent, especially if your midheaven is there in the 10th house, when Uranus crossed my midheaven, when Uranus moved into my 10th and then crossed my midheaven, which was over the course of a year or so, um, it was a time when there was a before and an after in terms of myself, seeing myself as an astrologer. Up until that time, I did not identify myself at all as an astrologer. I literally would have never identified myself as that, even though I was reading charts for people and I was doing that. I was following astrology. I was learning astrology. I was doing, week-long trainings. I was going off to Tuscany with Stephen Forrest for, every year for a week. Things like this that but I still didn't identify as an astrologer until Uranus came in and said, "Boom, you're an astrologer, did you know?" And and it was at that point that there was something in me that shifted in terms of my way of showing up to the world, that changed my identity, that changed my vision for the thing that I do out in the world. It wasn't necessarily to the exclusion of all else, but it was definitely something that became real in my awareness, in my consciousness. And this may be your case as well, especially as you have a dual sign on the 10th. You might find that you are, I don't know, an astrologer and this other thing. Many people can be that way, but if for you, it's going to be, oh, it's like, I'm married. No, I would never get married. Yes, I'm married, or whatever. The thing is going to change the way that you show up in the world, how you show up outside, and and how that feels from the inside out, how you are out in the world. At this point, we have Mars in your first house now after this incredibly long journey of Mars in your 11th, trying to figure out what your future is all about. In the 12th, how am I my own worst enemy? How am I not sorting myself out in a way that's constructive? And Mars is now in your first house saying, go, 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 do this thing. Right. So all of this to say that this is going to be a year ahead that is absolutely revolutionary. We're now going to go to the eclipses to finish up. We're going to the Pisces eclipse, which is on the 7th of September, 2025 at 7 p.m. roughly Universal Time. Again, I'm going to move the clock face forward. So now this does not correspond. Let me just say, wait, let's check the degree point here. Pisces lunar total eclipse. There we go. 15 degrees of Pisces. That means 15 degrees of Virgo. Notice that your ruler is there. So 15 degrees is what we're working with here, and an 18-degree north node. Now what we're doing as we go forward is to look for you on the ascendant. So that's going to change the degree points, but it's the point of the eclipse that I'm talking about. So now we have your ruler in your sign. That already happened in August, that Mercury moved into your sign. It means that it's very strong in the first house as well as on the sun. And that is where we find the nodal axis still. So here we have Saturn. Remember that famous 29-degree point again? Again, we're back at 29 degrees. We've got the 1 degree still represented in Aries with Neptune. So this story is still moving along. We now have these really strong dynamics. This is part of the whole of 2025. I didn't point this out before, but there is this incredible trinal and sextile, what's called a mini grand trine here, where we have Uranus trining Pluto, Uranus sextiling Neptune, and Neptune, of course, sextiling Pluto ongoingly. So Uranus is adding to that energy of change that's moving. There's something that's fluid, that's organic and necessary in this time. It's like ready for it, ready, totally ready. The difference here is that all of these planets are retrograde. So whatever the change was that was underway in the early part of 2025 may feel like there's a bit of backsliding, backtracking. Don't worry, it's all in good time. It's all necessary to reconstruct, to move things along in such a way that you feel that you've understood the remit. Now we have this, remember, 15-degree moon on the north node, and that's again highlighting something about relationships, the person or the topic or the way that you're relating to this individual or the quality of the relationship. Is this what I want? Is this the right thing? And something that you want to understand may require adjustment, because wherever the full moon is, and especially in an eclipse, we realize something, we become aware of something. The awareness in your case is no longer about you, but it's about the other person. again, as I mentioned with Neptune, there can have been some things that you didn't see very clearly, or things that were quite literally not told to you, or told to you in a way that was actually not true. One way or another, there may be some disappointment, there may be some disillusionment, there may be some downright deception that you're becoming aware of, and or there can also be this feeling of softening, and the feeling is more of having compassion for someone who previously you weren't able to really find compassion for. We still have this bigger dynamic, the bigger story here of the Uranus Pluto in a trine, and that is always going to be for the next couple of years the big story of how your career is changing your everyday life, or how your social status is changing your everyday life. All right. So while this is all going on in terms of what you're realizing about relationships, we have Mars in Libra. Mars in Libra is in a sextile to Venus. It's Venus is approaching a sextile to the Mars that she's ruling in your second house, and Mars is ruling that Neptune in your eighth house, remember. And as Mars is there in the second house, there might be something that you need to negotiate around money. Again, this is the house of your wealth, your money, your income, your belongings, your stuff, your family also. And of course, because it's Libra for you, it also represents relationships. So there's Mars there. That means something needs to change, stop, be severed, be dealt with. And Mars in Libra doesn't have an easy time doing that. But because you've got your ruler Mercury on your ascendant, and with that sun and with that south node, you're changing, and you're able, in this case, to speak up, to say, this isn't working for me. This doesn't work. You might find you have a way of being diplomatic about it. You have a way of dealing with it that can be constructive. Um, and this can actually bring you some real benefit that might be resolving a bigger story, this longer story that may have been underway. Equally, we have a square from Jupiter to Mars, and the Jupiter square Mars is a lot of enthusiasm. Jupiter is very strong, very dignified. So whatever this is enthusiastic about, it's really, or rather Mars squaring Jupiter, it's an enthusiasm for the future that makes you realize, I have to do this thing, whatever this thing is. I have to take this action on my behalf, perhaps for my self-esteem, or for my valuables, or for my based on my values, so that I can see the future that I want. That's the vision of the future that I want. And the very last thing that we're going to look at here for my dear Virgos is the 21st of September, and that is the solar eclipse. Remember the 29-degree thing again. There's the solar eclipse in your sign at 29 degrees of Virgo. Now, this is a partial eclipse because it's the node itself is at 18 degrees, and that's 11 degrees away from this, 10.5 degrees away from this solar eclipse, the new moon, which makes a solar eclipse. And we're now going to move, and it's in opposition to Saturn. Remember the beginning of the year, the first eclipse of the year, 14th of March, we had this as well. Do you remember we had this 23-degree lunar eclipse in your sign at 23 degrees of Virgo, opposite of Saturn at 22 degrees with the sun at 23 degrees, so in Pisces. So this is a continuation of that story, maybe a conclusion of that story. You're recognizing something based on March, based on what's been going on. So there's something to keep track of here. Again, going back in time, what was going on late February through early October. You'll get a lot of information about how things have been tracking. Now I'm just going to share. So this is 21st of September, almost 9 p.m. Universal Time. I'm just going to put you on the first house so we can see this very clearly. And of course, then we lose the eclipse. Okay, never mind. So we're going to pretend that that moon is with the sun at 29 degrees. Venus is in your first house. So remember this whole big story of the first 5 months of the year with Venus in your seventh house, and then in your eighth house, seventh house, eighth house up until the 6th of June. And now we've got Venus in your neck of the woods, and Venus is referring back to what she requires. Venus in Virgo, let's face it, is a bit fussy. She's not entirely satisfied. She's not nearly as easily satisfied as the Venus in Pisces, and that's why she loves being in Pisces, because it's kind of like, oh, it's all fine, it's all good, everybody's lovely, it's all fine. Whereas in Virgo, she's not so sure, and she might be a little critical, perhaps self-critical, or this might be a necessary review of what is important in terms of, based on Venus, in terms of what do I need, in terms of my desire nature, in terms of what I hope to find. And Venus in the first house, generally speaking, is very, very nice. Um, Depends on your natal chart, but it's a very nice feeling, uplifting feeling. And when you have that at the same time as you have a new moon in your first house, there's something very fresh coming in here in September for you, Virgo. Your ruler is in the second house of money, ruled by this Venus. Now, again, it's not by, we can't really call it a mutual exchange because they're not in a classical aspect, but they are in a semi-sextile. And so your ruler, Mercury, is ruling Venus, and Venus is ruling Mercury in your second house. And so that's a mutual generosity that's very favorable. If it weren't for that pesky Mars, it's okay though. We're going to let Mars hang out because we've already dealt with Mars in the whole month of September. We've been dealing with this Mars. We understand there's something that Mars needs to say. There's something that Mars needs to be grappling with. It's coming into a square with Pluto. And so when it finally squares Pluto, it's going to be very strong. So whatever this is brewing, whatever the thing is that you've been preparing to say, or that needs to be dealt with, or that has to be sorted, by the time Mars moves into the third house, which is just 2 days or a day, in fact, after, in fact, yeah, it's not even a day, later in the day. So by the 23rd of September, Mars is in your third house squaring Pluto. I think the exact square will be 2 days later. So then it's all systems go, change based on what you need to do, the actions, the willpower, the aims that you have with Mars in the third house, and deciding what to do about this sixth house story, which is your everyday work and what you want to see showing up. And when that happens, Mars perfects the sextile with Venus, which is also helpful. Mars sextiling Venus is cooperation. It's again around a sense of positivity and especially harmony in relationship. And when that happens, when we get that sextile, we create this yod, which will be a couple of days after, with Neptune, which is already kind of shaping up here. It's moved out, but it was kind of there with Saturn. So there's something that you've been working on. Remember, way, way, way back in February, March, April, and into May. And now Venus and Mars are sorting it all out. It's probably been about money. It's probably been about love. It's about relationships. How do I share this? What is mine? What is yours? What am I worth? And how does that show up in my everyday life? Mercury, your ruler, in a trine to Uranus, which it's ruling, and Venus is squaring Uranus, and so something here is changing your social status. It's something that seems to be working in your favor. There may be circumstances or a status update, a change, whatever, in terms of career or in terms of a social status or in terms of your ambition, change of ambition, and all of this is shaping up there in September. So Virgo, this is the wild ride that is 2025 for you. I wish you all the best. It's going to be, I think, a much more significant year, feeling like you're moving forward, feeling like things are really taking shape, that there's a bigger picture now for your life that's expanding as all of these outer planets are moving into new houses, especially pulling you out into the world, pulling you into your life, pulling you into what you consider to be your ambition and your vision, your visionary aspects of your life. So your everyday life is going to change from here on in. Take good care of yourself, Virgo. I know you do anyway. And lots of love and enjoy this year ahead. And I'll see you in some of these future videos. Take care. Bye-bye.